Tonight, we are here to explore what is the situation facing Jewish students in our universities, and as the headline in the London Jewish News put it on August the 31st, who has their backs? To guide us through these and other related topics, it is indeed a privilege for us to welcome Baroness Ruth Deech, who has spent a lifetime in academia dealing with these issues and the impact they have on Jewish students. She studied law at St Anne's College, Oxford, graduating with a first in 1965, and returned to the college in 1970 to be a tutorial fellow in law, a post she retained until 1991 when she was elected principal of the college. She retired in 2004. The college has since named its latest building after her, the Ruth Deech Building, the fourth to be named for a principal. Among other posts, she has held as Senior Proctor of the University of Oxford between 1985 and 86, as a member of the university's Hebdomadal Council of the UK Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, and from 1994 until 2002 was its chairman, and was appointed for a 4-year term as the governor of the BBC in 2002, the same year that she was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in recognition of her work at the HFEA. After leaving St Anne's, she was appointed the first independent adjudicator for higher education from 2004 to 2008, dealing with the resolution of student complaints at all UK universities, and in July 2005 she was made a life peer, sitting as a crossbencher. She is an active defender of Jewish students. In December 2016, Deech argued that Jewish students at UK universities were subject to increasing anti-Semitism. She is a patron of the activist group UK Lawyers for Israel. Tonight she chairs a panel comprising Joel Salmon, Parliamentary Officer of the Board of Deputies, Josh Holt, President of UJS, and hopefully later, Izzy Lenger, the Vice President of NUS, all of whom are involved with the care and welfare of Jewish students on campus. Please welcome Dame Baroness Deech.
Okay, thank you. It's great to be here in Edgware with 2 or maybe 3 of the most important young Jewish people that we have. And our young Jewish people, our students, are precious assets because they will be like you one day. They will be the stalwarts of the community. They will be the leaders of the community. And I take my hat off to those Jewish students who have the courage, or indeed are forced, to get active on campus. I completely understand that a student might want to go and just have a good time, enjoy themselves and do their study for 3 or 4 years. But some of them either get thrown into the fray or they choose to take up arms on behalf of Israel because there's no escaping it. When I was young, only 5% of young people went to university, and it was a cozy time, it was an innocent time before the 1967 war. But now our universities are miniature communities like the whole of Britain, with all its diversity and all its problems. And some campuses have become battlegrounds for the Middle East, Israel versus Palestine. There are at least 10 times as many Muslim students on campus as there are Jewish. And it's not just Muslim students, it's your left wing, your extreme right wing. A lot of people now find their identity in life, their ID, their banner of belonging to the good folk by attacking Israel, sometimes not even knowing what they're doing. And I think there is a failure of Holocaust education, which is compulsory in state schools. If so many young people can go through Holocaust education and then get to campus a year or 2 later and start talking about wiping Israel off the map and so on, have they learned nothing? And I digress to say, I personally wouldn't want to spend £50 million on yet another Holocaust memorial in the centre of London if we still have that particular situation. One more Holocaust memorial won't do it. What we need is education and brave young people like the 2 I have here on either side, with, I hope, a 3rd one to come. And I will hand over to them shortly. They're going to talk for 10 minutes each, and then we'll have lots of time for questions, and I will sum up at the end. I just want to say that I was misquoted last December when the papers said Baroness Deech says there are universities that are no-go areas. That wasn't my wording, that was the sub-editor of the Telegraph. I wouldn't ever say to a Jewish student, don't go to this university, because it might be the one that has the course they want. That's up to them. But we do know that there are some campuses that are worse than others, some are more friendly, some have more numbers than others, and that's a valid consideration. I think Jewish students have been badly let down by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, by the university authorities themselves, by the UCU, which is the Lecturers' Union, the UUK, which is the Universities' Union, none of whom seem to understand about anti-Semitism and the distinction between valid criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism on the other, which is why we have a new definition, a government-adopted definition. Anyway, enough from me. I now have pleasure in introducing Joel Salmon from the Board of Deputies, who deals with young people from there. He's been an activist all his life. Every institution he's been in, he has sprung to the defense of Jewish young people. He's still doing it to this day. And of course, the Board of Deputies is really important in the front line of this fight. So now I'm handing over to Joel for his 10 minutes on the board and anti-Semitism. And this is Izzy, who I think is feeling a bit delicate, and we're very, very glad to see her. Thank you for coming. I will just say, we now have the three most important young people in Jewish affairs on campus here around this table. Joel.
Well, thank you very much, Baroness Deech, for introducing me like that. It was very kind of you. And thank you all for coming to hear about this really, really important subject. So just by way of introduction, my name is Joel, and I'm the Parliamentary Officer at the Board of Deputies of British Jews. So that means that I mainly work on political advocacy, and I run the all-party parliamentary group on British Jews, of which Baroness Deech is a member. But I also work on campus affairs and ensure that we are looking after our young people at university. And we engage very strongly and regularly with our friends and colleagues at the Union of Jewish Students. So, as you may know, the Board of Deputies is the national representative body of the Jewish community in the UK. We are the first port of call for government, the media, and others seeking to understand the Jewish community's interests and concerns. And so what that means is that we talk to government, we talk to Parliament, and we advocate on your behalf about Jewish issues. So, for example, for the 2017 general election, we produced the Jewish Manifesto, covering areas such as anti-Semitism, campus affairs, Israel, Holocaust denial, but other things as well, like education and faith schools and shechita and circumcision, and making sure that our rights as Jews are protected and that we're free to live in the UK. So that's just an example of some of the things that we do. The Board of Deputies is a democratic body, so that means that synagogues and communal organisations across the country each elect deputies to represent them on the board. One example is Spencer over here, who is one of our deputies. So that makes the Board of Deputies a truly grassroots organisation. So if we're looking at the big picture of anti-Semitism in the UK, I think it's important that as communal organisations, we have to be responsible when talking about anti-Semitism. We have to acknowledge that it's an extremely grave threat to Jews in the United Kingdom and to other communities in the United Kingdom, but also not to sensationalise it. I think we have to be appropriate. So the first thing to say is that in general, life is pretty good for Jews in the UK. We're a confident, dynamic, vibrant community. I would say there's not really many places in the world where it is as good to be Jewish in the UK. But we also live in troubled times. And the CST recently released an anti-Semitic incidents report, which showed that anti-Semitic incidents were at a record high. And there are various reasons for that. More people are reporting anti-Semitism. There's been a rapid growth in social media. And there's been a resurgence of both the far left and the far right in UK political and social society. And the Board of Deputies has been extremely vocal about anti-Semitism in the UK, ensuring that the Jewish voice is heard at the highest level in government and in the opposition. So, for example, when the famous Baroness Chakrabarty came out with her report on anti-Semitism, we called it a whitewash for peerage's scandal because it was really not strong enough at all and really represented cronyism. So we were very strong on that. And so when we talk about campus, university is a hotbed for student activism. And so campus is not immune from the challenge of anti-Semitism. If we look at anti-Semitism on campus, in my view, it is manifested in two different ways. You get political anti-Semitism and you get more casual anti-Semitism, and of course there can be overlaps. So political anti-Semitism is that which occurs in political discourse, in political protest, and as you mentioned, almost always in relation to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And then we have casual anti-Semitism, which is stuff that comes about more in everyday conversation. So a throwaway remark, or banter, or even a compliment. So when I first took up the job at the Board of Deputies, I had dinner with a friend, and I said, I've taken up a job at the Board of Deputies, we represent the Jewish community, and she goes, wow, Joel, that's so cool, you're going to be so powerful working for the Jewish lobby, like, that's amazing. And I was like, it's a bit awkward. So clearly, that represents ignorance about what anti-Semitism is. And I think it's clear that often anti-Semitism isn't intentional and is the result of ignorance. And so it's important that people like the Board of Deputies, the UJS and the NUS and our politicians, that we all have a role to play in educating students about what anti-Semitism actually is. I think it's also very important to say that every university is different and that the nature and extent of anti-Semitism will be very different. Some campuses, they're really, really political. And you have protests, and you'll have motions, and you'll have BDS, or the Israel-Palestine situation will be quite heated. But on other campuses, sometimes 5 minutes down the road, it barely gets a mention. And so the nature of anti-Semitism is much more low-key, or maybe not there at all. But at times it can creep up behind the scenes. So I went to St Andrews University in Scotland, had an absolutely amazing time. And the only things I really came across were those sorts of throwaway remarks. And also, strangely, I didn't really consider this to be a factor, but a lot of Christians go to St Andrews, and so sometimes you get traditional Christian anti-Semitism, which you just wouldn't ever expect. And again, I think that's down to ignorance. And so when things do go wrong, I think it's important to say that all the bodies here are here to help, and we're here to intervene. So when something does go wrong, the Board of Deputies will intervene. So it was only after the Board of Deputies President Jonathan Arkush literally had to yell at the principal of UCL on the phone after there were some really intimidating anti-Israel protests at UCL that they agreed to a full investigation and reform their rules of events. And we had a subsequent meeting with them and UJS and other communal colleagues. And another example is that the university's minister, Joe Johnson, as I think, Spencer, you alluded to, he sent a letter to all universities in the UK warning them about the so-called Israeli Apartheid Week and explaining how that can often link in with anti-Semitism on campus. And that only came about because of meetings that we'd had with senior civil servants. We'd organised meetings, and that's what UJS joined us with alongside the CST, chaplaincy and the JLC. So to end on a lighter note, I thought, although we have these issues on campus, I also want to reassure you that while there can be these challenges at university, and they can be more acute at some universities than others, I think it's fair to say that our students do thrive on campus and have an overwhelmingly positive experience. And when something bad does happen, and it is generally quite occasional, although you see it in the headlines, we've all got their back. We are there for the students. We ensure that whether it's low level or high level, that we're there to protect them, we're there to support them, and we're there to make sure they have an absolutely amazing time.
I'm now delighted to introduce Josh Holt, who is the elected president of the Union of Jewish Students, which for a year at least is the very top of the pyramid, and someone who has got all the cares, religious, social, political, and all the joys of all your children and grandchildren who may be at university on his shoulders. And we've had a succession of terrific presidents of the UJS, and Josh from the University of Nottingham is following in their footsteps. Josh.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here tonight. So at UJS, first of all, I'm going to tell you a bit about who we are and what we do. So we are the voice of Jewish students. We are representing 8,500 Jewish students on campus across the UK and Ireland in 64 JSOCs. And what that means is when there's Jewish activity, when there is Jewish activity on campus, we strive to facilitate that. We work with Jewish students on the ground to allow them to engage in all sorts of activities. And so the premise of this panel and the question is, anti-Semitism, just how bad is it? And I understand that in the past year, especially the year before I came into this role, there were some serious issues on campus, multiple campuses. We've mentioned at this alone, Oxford, very famous for the Labour Club. We have also mentioned UCL and the events at King's. And these are serious issues, and we can't deny that they happen, and we can't deny that when they do happen, they need serious repercussions. But what I would say is that off the back of these terrible events that we saw in King's, SOAS, wherever it may be, we have completely transformed the way in which universities react to the issue of anti-Semitism, and we are currently transforming the way that they react to the Israel and Palestine debate on campus, and when that anti-Zionism crosses into the anti-Semitic waters. So I think testimony to the incredible success that has been seen is the fact that whilst unfortunately the anti-Semitic figures of incidences across the UK went up, if you look at the numbers for campus, that was a decline. And so that shows that obviously something on campus is going better, and I think that it's now safe to say that we are beyond the tide of incidences that we saw last year, and it seems to be in a lull, and that is thanks to the incredible work of last year's team and also of our communal partners in the wider community. An example of when we have successfully managed to achieve this end would be National Action. It's been prescribed as a terror organization. They're neo-Nazis. They put stickers on campuses, they visit campuses. I mean, they've even threatened fellow panelists, which I'm sure they can tell you more about. These are a vile group of people. They have all sorts of vendetta. They have a vendetta against Jewish students and also other BME students. And because of the work that we have done along with other communal organizations, namely CST, to combat National Action, they've been prescribed by the government. So now it's illegal for them to be on campus. That's far-right anti-Semitism. That's a lot more straightforward. I understand that as well. But we've had proactive work with student unions and labor clubs, as well as universities, sabbatical members, staff members, and just general students to train them on how to identify and deal with anti-Semitism. And that training has reached over 500 people to date. So again, that shows that we have seen this situation, we have reacted to this situation, and now we're in a much better place because of it. But I would like to flip this panel on its head if I could, because the framing of this question, just how bad is anti-Semitism? Well, I was saying that's the wrong way of looking at this. And actually, we should be celebrating and examining the incredible, incredible thing that is Jewish life on campus. Because being a Jewish student in university in the UK is pretty good. We have incredible events from Friday night dinners, Booze for Jews, Interfaith Week, Le Meudon, campus contingent, Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah, Lunch and Learns. We're organizing trips around Europe. Being a Jewish student on campus is enjoyable, it is fun, and there's so much incredible activities that they can engage in. This year, for example, at UJS, we're hoping to run networks to allow Jewish students to engage in with professionals in the community and the career they want to go into. There's so much good going on, and it's so important for us as an organization, but also for Jewish students themselves, that campus experience is not defined by the fight to balance the conversation on Israel and the fight against anti-Semitism, because I'm a Jew, I'm loud and proud of my Judaism, and I won't allow detractors of myself or Israel to define what that means. And I think that's really important that the students in this room know that, and also the other generations in this room know that as well. So, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions, obviously, afterwards, but I just would like to leave you with the message that students are all right. It's actually, campus is a good place to be, but when there are problems, and they will come up and we're not naive, we can deal with them. We are in a much stronger place. There's the IRA definition of anti-Semitism really covers kind of the anti-Zionist bases, and we are in a place where we can deal with this going forward, and at the moment, things are great.
And now we come to Izzy Lenger, who recently secured a great triumph in being elected the Welfare Officer of the National Union of Students. And as she says herself, she's absolutely upfront about her Judaism. She's suffered for it by being trolled at the University of Birmingham. And I think the fact that she was elected, and it's quite rare, I think, for Jewish students to get on the executive of the NUS, is a real triumph and something very special. So we're delighted to have her here this evening. I think she hasn't been very well recently, so we're even more delighted to have her. So Izzy, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me, and thank you for the introduction. I guess before I start talking, I do want to apologise, for being late and running on Jewish Mean Time, but also for being slightly under the weather, so do bear with me. So I guess I actually would have preferred it if me and Josh kind of switched round, because I'm going to talk about kind of my experiences on campus as kind of a vocal Jewish student, more within the kind of political aspect, and how I have received anti-Semitism from it, and then how that kind of led me to run to be the role and the job that I have now. And I wanted to leave with Josh's message as to, like, it isn't all bad, but yeah, do bear his message in mind whilst I'm speaking. So I guess I'll just quickly explain kind of who am I and what led me to this role. So I'm Izzy, I'm from North West London, obviously. I went to school at North London Collegiate School, where I led the Jewish Society there. I then went on FZY year course, and then went to university in Birmingham. I started to get involved in my student union because I saw there was like changes with my course that I wanted to change. Like I studied theology and religion, and I wasn't getting feedback in time, and it was really annoying me. So I decided to run for my union council, and it kind of ended up being a bit of a slippery slope into student politics. So when I was on the council, like I said, I didn't get involved solely to represent Jewish students. I had obviously an interest in anti-Semitism and fighting kind of what Jewish students were facing on campus, but also just to change my course. However, I saw there was a severe lack of Jewish representation within the room, within the student council in Birmingham, despite being at one of the largest kind of universities, as they like to call them, the universities with the biggest JSOCs. So I then kind of spent that year and the subsequent years organising to get more Jewish voice and Jewish representation, and the issues that kind of Jewish students were facing were coming more to the forefront of what was happening in the union, and making them kind of be the things that the union was campaigning on and the leadership of the union were taking seriously. I then decided to run to lead the union. So I took a year out between my second and third year and was one of their vice presidents in the union, interestingly, specifically in charge of education, mainly because I didn't like my course. So then kind of spent that year bringing the profile of Jewish students to the forefront of the union, but then also to the university. It was amazing. It was brilliant to have that responsibility, and I really enjoyed it, and working with the Jewish Society and helping them as much as I could. However, it would be wrong to dismiss kind of how putting myself in a public position on campus as a kind of vocal Jewish woman, how that led to me being trolled by groups such as National Action, groups often on the far right, also on the far left. Interestingly, anti-Semitism seems to be a thing that unites the political spectrum on all extremes. And so the far right, anti-Semitism on campus, so there was one example is I found a sticker once on my campus by the library, and it said Hitler was right. It was just one sticker, but I decided to tweet about it. So, just took to Twitter just to be like, this is happening in the world. I didn't expect the backlash, I guess, I got. And from that, it was posted in kind of far-right websites and stuff. And then that led to kind of a lot of trolling and attacking, which led to kind of threats and stuff like that. And it was awful. And it kind of led me to be scared to walk around my own campus when I was leading the union and had that position of responsibility to be there. But I tried to not have that mentality and turn it on its head and call it out where it was happening and make it vocal. And it was hard, but I felt like it had to be done. So I said to myself, like, what's the point in it just sitting in my inbox getting me down? Why aren't I sharing this out and showing people like what the reality of not all Jewish students by any means, the small minority of Jewish students who may want to get involved and may want to call it out, what they can experience, and don't always experience, but what they can experience. And it led to a lot of publicity and stuff, and kind of started the rhetoric, I think, a lot more, talking about it, especially within the National Union of Students. I then ran to be on the National Union of Students' National Executive Council. That's a lot of words, but it's essentially the kind of governing body of NUS, a volunteer position, and did that for 2 years. So again, tried to represent the interests of Jewish students in that body. The first year was pretty plain sailing. Encountered a few issues, so this was 2 years ago now, whilst I was a sabbatical officer, encountered a few issues, felt that a lot of the time I had to defend myself of even being in the room rather than, because I was Jewish, rather than being there and talking about anti-Semitism, or even talking about the massive changes to higher education that's going on at the moment, or the student funding crisis or housing crisis that's going on. But I couldn't talk about those issues because I felt like I had a massive barrier in my way that I had to jump over and justify to some people why I should be there. However, I'm sure most of you in this room are aware kind of the situation of the NUS last year. And I was on the executive last year, and it was a lot more of a different story. The issue of anti-Semitism wasn't new to NUS. It didn't just start and end with a specific leadership of NUS by any means. But yeah, last year was really difficult. And the leadership of NUS didn't make it any easier, so I found myself being kind of pushed off committees that I would sit on. I found myself, like I said, defending the right to be in the room. And understandably, this led to a lot of outrage from Jewish students on campus. We had a motion at our Union of Jewish Students annual kind of AGM, annual general meeting, to disaffiliate with NUS, so to not work with them. And I found that quite hard because I believe in unions, I believe in the power of unions, and that they can be a really great force for social change, especially NUS. And it was really hard to see myself and fellow Jewish students be in that position where we care about a whole range of options, a whole range of things, a whole range of issues in the world, but we can't even engage with them because we're Jewish. And that was really hard to see. And there were a load of other things that were problematic that year, and due to the work of the Union of Jewish Students and the Union of Jewish Students helping me as well, we managed to kind of challenge the rhetoric quite strongly and quite loudly. I guess that then led me to run to be their vice president. And at that conference, not only did I get elected, which was amazing, we managed to introduce the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and a load of other things, and obviously elected a completely new leadership of NUS, somewhat surprisingly, but students were fed up with what's happening. They're fed up in general with Jewish students being targeted. A lot of the rhetoric around on the conference was Jewish students are being ignored, and that was the work of NUS and the work of UJS and the work of Jewish students who put this on the agenda so much, and they fought, and that's really to be applauded. So now my role in NUS, I am the vice president for welfare. So not only am I kind of a director of the company and stuff like that, the issues that kind of I work with are around student funding, student housing, student mental health, and interfaith and hate crime. So that is obviously kind of the reason why I ran for welfare, and in that, oversees the anti-Semitism work. So I kind of hope that explained a bit. But I just want to echo Josh's message that apart from all the experiences on campus in this regard, I had the most unbelievable time being a Jewish student on campus. Being in Birmingham was amazing. We have an amazing Jewish life. I got a free hot meal at least once a day from a different chaplain. That's unbelievable. And as a student, obviously, you love that. And Jewish life was amazing, and there was a support network that too often get ignored. So the headlines, and NUS has done this awful thing again, and yes, it has done it, but you forget about that there are that massive support network underlying, beneath those headlines, that are there helping Jewish students, and both Jewish and non-Jewish, and both vice presidents of NUS and not, and staff members, and everyone in the movement that really are there to support Jewish students. And if Jewish students do want to get involved, I would always recommend them to do so. And yeah, I welcome questions. I hope that explains everything. Thank you.
Izzy is so right about the support network. I was thinking back to my own student days, and some of my best friends, even today, are people I met at JSOC. not to mention my husband. So, there is a lot to be said for it. I'm a bit more pessimistic than the students, I guess, because I'm looking at it long term. And while it's great that individual students have a wonderful time, it seems to me there's a sort of slippery slope going down the hill all the way, perhaps mirroring the general condition of Jewish people and communities right across Europe, that it's not what it used to be. I also find that I personally am more frightened by left-wing anti-Semitism than right, because on the right they know what they're doing and they're mostly regarded as dangerous or buffoons, whereas the left wing will deny it, they're completely in denial, and they're sliding out from under. And I think that's much, much more pernicious. And also they're much closer to the centre of power. I also deplore the fact that Oxford has still not punished those students who were responsible for the really dreadful events of nearly 2 years ago now in the Student Labour Society. The Vice-Chancellor of Oxford was speaking up the other day saying that she's worth her salary of $350,000, even though I have tackled her several times on this and they've done nothing about it. And my last word before I throw this open to questions is, I have a test for what is anti-Semitic on campus. I'm very upset every year by Israel Apartheid Week, which I think is continuing. And my test is this. Supposing you substitute the word Pakistan for Israel, would students contemplate a, let's say, Pakistan Honor Killing Week? Supposing students got together and said, we're fed up with honor killing in Pakistan, or if you like, rape in India, or executions in Iran. Can you imagine for a moment that university authorities would allow a Pakistan Torture Week or a Pakistan Honor Killing Week? Because lots of students, probably thousands, hundreds of thousands, are of Pakistan origin. It wouldn't be allowed, not for a minute, is my bet. Likewise with India. So why should it be allowed in relation to Israel? So I think that's always a test. Try substituting another country for Israel, and you get to see the double standards, in my view. Now, the floor is open for questions. So please stand up, speak clearly, and say who you are.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Daniel Sugarman. I'm from the Jewish Chronicle. My question is for Izzy. Obviously, we all know what happened last year with Malia, but I must say that the events of conference this year were incredible, and walked away from that feeling that after all the time and effort spent by UJS and people within NUS together, that had come to fruition. I was just wondering what exactly went on, if you can talk a bit about it, behind the scenes in terms of working with people, including Robbie Young, including Shakira Martin, how exactly things got to that point.
So Malia was the president last year, and Shakira Martin is now the president, who she beat Malia in her re-election, and Robbie is another one of the vice presidents. So I think that the run-up to conference was a year-long piece of work, if not longer, and it stemmed, I think the successes at conference, like I said, stemmed from the dissatisfaction of the wider student movement, and it stemmed from Jewish students who may not want to get involved or may not have been involved prior to last year. They saw a reason to get involved. Look, it wasn't a great reason to get involved, and I hate that that was what got people involved, but it did. And that passion and that collectivism, I think that Jewish students, but also non-Jewish students, held was really important to shaping the narrative of the whole year. So there were over kind of 30 disaffiliation referendum on campus. So that was student unions running big referendum on campus to disaffiliate from the NUS. And in that, the main rhetoric that was coming out alongside things that NUS isn't relevant and stuff was the issue of anti-Semitism within the movement. And it was the organising on both sides of that debate, but of the debate itself and the discussions that were being had between Jewish students and then non-Jewish student kind of students together, and everything that really shaped the narrative. And we saw at that conference that students were at that conference because they must have run to be a delegate from their university because they were just fed up. They were fed up of a national union that they see can have so much power that can change their education, where they don't have enough money to pay for their rent every month, or they don't, they're living in really poor standard housing. But NUS wasn't campaigning on that issue. It was too busy, fighting and infighting, and had, it seemed like it was dealing with other issues. And namely, one of them was anti-Semitism. And I think that organising and that rhetoric was what led people to want to run and led people to want to change it and realise that you have to be in that room if you want to change something. You have to be a seat at the table or a vote in the room. That, I think, was what led it. I think then a lot of it was the work of allies, so UJS and work with people within NUS, and to build up allies and non-Jewish allies, to campaign on the work and find the people that were interested. So Robbie Young, one of the vice presidents, commissioned a piece of research last year, still with the other leadership, but he's a massive ally of the Jewish community. He commissioned research into the experiences of Jewish students, which really shaped the narrative as well as to actually what Jewish students were going through on campuses. They had, I think, just under 500 respondents from Jewish students on campus, which was amazing, and the first piece of research that had happened. And I think that people like Shakira and Robbie and everyone else that kind of got elected at that conference said that, just put their heart on the sleeve and that we will care for Jewish students, and they were honest about it, and that was I think why it changed. I hope that answered your question, but I think it's about organising throughout the year and organising well.
Keith Myers, we've heard about the good work done at UJS. Yeah. The thing is, after UJS, you come out into society, and what we have is one of the main political parties who are perhaps institutionally anti-Semitic, given the, I don't know the best way to describe, the apathy they have towards Jewish concerns. And I was wondering what you can do, what your experience can do to help us actually deal with that.
So I think that if there's one thing we can learn from the way that we faced the issue that we have seen in the last year or two with the NUS's leadership and the issues in wider society, as Izzy mentioned, that is that we can make the change from being voices inside the room. It is all well and good to have a protest. NUS loves protests. It's all well and good to shout angrily from outside, but there's only a limited amount that you can do in doing so. I, for example, at UJS conference, when students, some of whom were on my campaign team for president, put forward a motion that we disaffiliate from NUS, I stood up and I said, I disagree. I think we need to, yes, it's a difficult environment, yes, it's uncomfortable, and there's actually open and outward anti-Semitism in the movement at that time. And I think there probably still is to some extent, it's improving. But I said that we should fight within that movement to claim it, because that is a space that Jewish students should be allowed to engage in. We shouldn't say, oh, NUS is beyond the pale, Jewish students shouldn't be able to unionize in a wider context. Jewish students should be defined, again, by anti-Semitism, by anti-Israel hostility. And so I'm not personally a Labour Party member, but I know that many people in my team this year are, and many people on this panel as well. And I think that there is no...
Who could that be?
And I think that when you are faced with these issues that you see, and if it is your political party, then I would encourage you to be involved in it and to make the change from within. Because the second you give up and walk away, which everyone has every right to do, may I add, because why should it? There's always a burden, and where does the buck stop? But if you take it upon yourself to be the one that takes on that burden, then you are making sure that that is a space that can remain a space where Jewish people, and in the work that UJS does, Jewish youth and students can remain involved in that. And I think that's really important, that we show these people, anti-Semites on the left and right, people are detractors, that actually Jewish people can be involved in any space. There is no place that we should be excluded from. And that's why I hope that answers your question. I would encourage more involvement rather than less.
I think, well, the Board of Deputies hasn't exactly been quiet about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And it's something that we're really concerned about, and it's something we've been very vocal about. you only look to last week, the comments made by an MP, Chris Williamson, who said that there are people who are weaponising the issue of anti-Semitism. I mean, that's just ridiculous, it's offensive, and it's totally wrong. And it diminishes the victims of anti-Semitism. But he doesn't represent the Labour Party, and I think what's really encouraging is that there are a lot of people within the Labour Party who are on our side. I was at the Jewish Labour Movement Conference on Sunday, and we have so many allies in the party who speak up for the Jewish people in the UK. And they were united in their criticism of things like this. So I think it's really important, one, that we strengthen the moderate wing, and two, that when people do say bad things, we call them out, and we call them out immediately, and that there are people that we can also bring with us. So an example is Naz Shah, who has said some horrendous things in the past, but we did a lot of work behind the scenes to really bring her back into the scene. And she publicly apologized. She said she understood why what she said was wrong, and she acknowledged her mistakes. And I think that's what real leadership is about. It's about making sure that you stick your head above the parapet, but you also bring people along with you, and you change opinion, and you change opinion for the better.
And thank you. Next question.
Hello, good evening. I'm Deborah Gabsey. Something over 30 years ago, I was at University in Manchester, and even then we were bused to Birmingham and Leeds to support the Jewish students when there was an anti-Israel, anti-Zionist motion. So we raised our voices as much as we could then, and I was not in any great degree subjected to stereotyping, etc., from people who had never met a Jew and didn't know what on earth a Jew was, except they thought they were rich from London, which wasn't the case. So there was ignorance then, and I think one of the main things behind anti-Semitism and it is ignorance and lack of knowledge of what on earth a Jew is and who we are. 10 years ago, my daughter was at Manchester University. She also experienced some problems there, and so it goes on. I have 2 more children who maybe will be going to university in the future. What I'm thinking, and what do you think of taking this battle, if we will, a step back into schools and educating people? I think the only way to put a stop to this, it's been going on for 30 years, 40 years, however long, and it's still ongoing, perhaps in waves, sometimes worse, sometimes better, in different decades. But if there's any hope of putting a stop to this just in the population in general, it's education, and not just Holocaust education, but education about communities and society in general and all the different elements that there are, including who is a Jew and what is a Jew, and how we're just the same as everybody else. And then you will not go to university and meet people who have never met a Jew and don't know what a Jew is.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And one could broaden that and say, well, how does this tie in with religious schools, Jewish schools or other religious schools, and are they giving a complete picture? Who'd like to answer that one?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that education doesn't just start at university, obviously. You need to change perceptions throughout children's time at school. So one thing that we do is that we go into schools and we go into non-Jewish schools and we explain to them what a Jewish life means, what it is, and how it means different things for different people. And there's not just one kind of Jew, but there's lots of different kinds of Jews in all shapes and sizes. So you might be aware that every local council in England and Wales has something called a SACRO. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically where they set the local curriculum for religious education in that local authority. And so we map out the UK, and we see making sure that there's a Jewish representative on every SACRO council in England and Wales, to make sure that you can't, so that Judaism isn't just taught accurately where there happen to be lots of Jews. I mean, there's only 50 parliamentary constituencies out of 650 where there's more than a few hundred Jews in the UK. So we've got a huge task because our community is so concentrated in a specific area. And so this is one thing that we're really investing in at the moment, is making sure that we have volunteers who go out into schools. We do a travelling exhibition, a Jewish living exhibition, which ensures that local kids can come and they can see what it means to see what a shofar is, see what a Chanukah is, what it means to eat kosher or maybe not eat kosher, and all that sort of thing. So I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's one thing that we should all be doing.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, for your question. I again, completely agree. I think it's great to hear that you used to go travelling around different campuses. Collective action is always good, like everyone in numbers. That's really great to hear, and it still continues today. But I do agree with your idea that most of the anti-Semitism does stem from ignorance, and then in that the role is education. I would say, of the anti-Semitic incidents, probably both within the Labour Party but also on campus, do stem from a lack of education. And I think that the role of education, like Joel said, doesn't begin and end at universities by any means. When students, when people aren't meant to go to university, I think we live in London, the most culturally diverse city in the world. That's unbelievable. Like, we should really be harnessing that within schools, and we should be lobbying, both within NUS, within UJS, but also through like the parliamentary means of the Board of Deputies. I think that, and yes, it is the role of religious schools as well to be teaching, not just, I didn't go to religious schools, so I can't really comment, but be teaching the role of their religion, but also, the role of all religions, and just teaching and embracing it. And that's why the work I want to do this year does centre around interfaith within NUS, and an appreciation of religions, not just tolerance. We hear the word tolerance being thrown around. There's nothing really to tolerate in my eyes. We should have a community of acceptance and embracement, whatever the word is, and warmth, rather than tolerance. And I think that if anyone's watching Educating Great in Manchester, if anyone's been watching it, I've just watched the first episode.
It's brilliant.
It's good, isn't it? I would recommend everyone to watch it. But there was just, this might be a really niche example, but kids aren't, born with prejudice, and we saw that in the school where I forget one of the kids' names, but I think he's called Musharraf, came from Syria, and you just saw the beautiful friendship that came when people didn't expect this friendship to come with one of his counterparts that had grown up in England, and that is where we start the education, because that is where kids don't see it kind of as we see it, for the most part. And I think that it's really important to start as young as possible in compulsory education. I completely agree with you.
I think also, I completely agree with what Izzy has said, and I think it is nice to see that the board is focusing more on schools. But also, I think that once they have reached university age, it's not too late. And I know that from the work we've done, that has proven to be the case. A perfect example of this is I'm involved in the Parliamentors program, which is where you're mentored by a member of parliament, and then it's in an interfaith setting. And so they have an induction day. And in that induction day, I met this individual. He was Somali, he'd grown up there. And we got talking, he found out I was Jewish, and the conversation of Zionism came up. And he said to me, "Are you a Zionist?" And I was like, "Yes." And then he said to me, "Isn't that evil Judaism?" And then rather than thinking, whoa, okay, I'm not going to now engage with this person, I understood that it came from a place of ignorance. And in this particular context, and I think context is very important here, I decided it was worth trying to take this individual on a journey. And I did. I had a long conversation with him. He's just come back from one of our trips to Israel that we run, where we've taken 120 predominantly non-Jewish students to Israel. And he now understands what it means to be Jewish, how different Jews have different identity, and also how there is a nuance in that situation, in this conflict, and how that crossover between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism isn't as blurry as perhaps some people would like to make it out that it is. And so I think that whilst I completely agree there is room, and we should be educating from as young as possible when the prejudice doesn't exist, there is still the scope to do that now, and that's just one of the 120 people we just took to Israel. I'm sure that there were many more prejudices that have been debunked, and so that's just one example of the work we do to that end where that has been successful.
So can I just quickly add? Spencer's reminded me, I do need to mention something. So a couple of months ago, we had a situation in a museum in the southwest of England, and it was like an archaeological museum, and it was talking about eating practices of ancient civilizations, and someone went to this museum and they saw this exhibit, and one of the plaques that was one of the educational bits, it said that some communities like Judaism still practice the ancient and outdated practice of shechita, which is the abominable religious slaughter of animals, and then they use the blood, and all these like crazy ignorant things, and so that sort of is part of the situation that we do see quite regularly, is this kind of ignorance of anti-Semitism. And so one thing that we have done is produce something called the Definitive Guide for Judaism. So it's a book. It's produced by Clive Lawton, and we've sent it around all schools, Jewish, non-Jewish, and also synagogues. And basically, it's the definitive guide to teaching Judaism, because people often have a sort of Wikipedia understanding of Judaism. They hear something, and so what this will allow is sort of hopefully a standard understanding of at least the basics. So if you have any questions about that, or also about becoming a volunteer, about going into schools, then do feel free to talk to me, or also Spencer as well.
Another question?
Marvin Shaw, former student of Central School of Speech and Drama, so I know that student life can be great, and it's good to hear. It's good to see actually some active students here and some other interested students as well. What I'm wondering is about two things. One is, how much involvement is there with the Jewish students on campus? Because there must be some Jewish students that don't get involved at all, that aren't interested, and maybe they're lost. So I'm wondering about the percentage of activity. And the other people I'm also wondering, and I'm wondering if they give you any sort of problems, are any of those, let's say, possibly anti-Semitic Jews or anti-Israel Jews, people from Jews for Justice Palestinians, for example, are they a problem or not? So perhaps you could speak about other Jewish people on campus. Thank you. And do we need, when we talk about education, how much education do we need amongst our own?
To address what you have said, I think that I'll give you the figures from our latest annual review. So we engage in our work directly 3,500 Jewish students. Sorry, that's correct? That's 4,500 Jewish students. So just over half of the Jewish students in the UK, we engage directly through our work. That's UJS. I think what you find, and I'm sure Izzy can vouch for that, I went to Nottingham, Izzy went to Birmingham, is you have different types of Jewish students, and sometimes there are some Jewish students that go to specific campuses, usually those with lesser provision, in terms of like kashrut or whatever that may be, to kind of escape from the bubble, predominantly the Northwest London bubble. And so in terms of the way you direct your question about how we can engage those students, you suggest they might be lost. I think that there is definitely work to be done around ensuring our visibility as an organization, and there's many other campus providers as well. But as a peer-led organization, it's very important to us that people engage in our activity because they want to and not because they feel we have to. We don't want to impose any type of Judaism on students. We want to facilitate the discovery of Jewish culture, Jewish practice through heritage, through Israel engagement, through whatever means it may be. And it's the results when campus providers don't do this, and when they actively seek out Jews and they try and use all these various means in order to almost force Jewish activity, I would say is counterproductive, because we want engaged Jewish students, engaged Jewish activists who are doing what they're doing because they love it, because they're passionate, and because they love their religion and their people, and they want to work to that end. And that is something that I think is very important, and that I think of the 4,500 Jewish students that we engage every year, I'm confident that is the case. And there are some students that they don't want to be engaged, they don't want to be a part of this. And I would say to them, we're always here for you, we'll always be here with open arms, but we don't want to impose. In terms of what you were saying about anti-Zionist Jews, so I'm sure it's no secret, like I ran against someone who called it bagels, dreidels, and socialism, but he was an ardent supporter of the BDS movement, and that was his political persuasion. And so as the Union of Jewish Students, we're the Union of Jewish Students, not the Union of Zionist students, not the Union of like Lakudnik students. But that's not, so with that, we have to be representative. We have to understand and acknowledge that there are Jewish students. The percentage varies. Most people say maybe about 4 to 5% who identify in an anti-Zionist way. And it's very difficult to engage with them in some of the work we do, especially around Israel engagement. We're very proud of that work that we do. But as an organization, we are mandated by conference policy to support a two-state solution. And we do so, and we work. I mean, for example, I just told you about 120 students we take into Israel. We run Taglit trips as well. Our training was in Israel. Like, we do a lot of Israel engagement. We're very proud about that. And so I think that it's very important that all Jewish students feel welcome, that all Jewish students can engage with UJS, and we can facilitate the exploration of their Jewish identity. And then sometimes when it comes to anti-Zionist students, I will hold my hands up and say, okay, the provisions that UJS makes for anti-Zionist avenues into Jewish identity are limited, but that's because of our conference policy, I would say. So I hope that somewhat answers your question.
I guess I'd just like to follow on from what Josh said. So when I was a student and involved in UJS had a broad range of kind of opportunities available. So not only did I get involved in the more political side, but I also competed in the UEFA Cup, which was the Jewish Football League. I came second. I'm really proud of it. The trophy's up in my room. But also University Challenge. So, for students interested in pub quizzes and quizzes and stuff and like that. And so UJS did offer, and still do, and they do like a cooking thing and stuff like that. And so they do offer kind of loads of different opportunities to get involved. It's probably rich for me to say because I mainly came down the political route, but they do offer a broad range of kind of activities and stuff. And it's very also devolved onto campuses. So every Jewish society will run something that's kind of appropriate for their Jewish society as well. And that's really great. And like I said, in Birmingham, we had amazing opportunities. And maybe St Andrews had different ones, but that was relevant to your smaller Jewish community. And kind of like Josh said, I guess I'm probably repeating him a bit, but UJS is a democratic organisation. And inevitably that will marginalise some people. Often I disagree with a lot of the policy that's passed at UJS conference. But UJS and NUS has a role to represent all students through the democratic policy, but also to bring in students and find the way for them to engage when they might not engage with kind of the mainstream activities that are going on. And that is something definitely we should be working on and picking up on and enhancing that, really, seeing where there are commonalities rather than differences in the community.
I think if we talk about the far left and anti-Zionist Jews, I think it's quite interesting that in Josh's election, I think the far left got about, 10% of the vote, less than 10% of the vote? Just credit to Josh and the campaign he ran, but also it shows that they're not a particularly strong force in Jewish student politics, and actually, I think we're really confident. Jewish students are vibrant, they're dynamic, and I think they're confident enough in their Jewish identity and in their relationship with Israel. And I think we should be really encouraged by that election result, because I think people were really nervous about it, but the result showed what Jewish life is at university. Of course, you're always going to get some loonies, but you're also going to get some, the mainstream people. And in terms of students who aren't involved in JSOC, well, my brother's going to university next week, and my mum's really worried about this because, he's very Jewish, but he's like, I don't want to go to JSOC. Like, Joel did that. It's okay. I don't need to do that. And so my mum's like, but we have to make him go, and he has to be, go involved in things. I think the important thing is for you as friends and as family to do is you don't have to say you have to go to every single event. You don't have to be on the committee, but I think at least go to the Freshers Fair and introduce yourself, sign up for membership, and then at least you're on the database. At least the people who are Jewish there know who you are, and you know who they are, and then at least people know who each other are, and they can look after each other if things do get bad. I think it's probably not the wisest idea to, say, go to JSOC, go to JSOC, go to JSOC, because as 18-year-olds, if you say that, they're not going to go to JSOC. So I think it's important that UJS has a presence, and it does have a presence on over 60 universities, and I think that's really great. And the fact that it's there is the main thing. The fact that if things do go really wrong, or if people just decide that they do want to get involved, there is a JSOC there is a Jewish life there, and there is something that the students can go to.
Thanks. Another question?
Madam Chair, it's Geoffrey Alderman. It's become clear to me, Madam Chair, over recent months that some taxpayer-funded universities in this country are, how shall I put this delicately, less inclined to be active in combating anti-Jewish prejudice than others. I seem to recall that your parliamentary colleague, Baroness Amos, as the head of the School of Oriental and African Studies, seemed extremely unwilling to adopt, for her institution to adopt, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. In that context, my question to members of the panel is, do they not think that the time has come when higher education institutions, in receipt of taxpayers' money, primarily but not only through research funding and tuition fees via the Student Loans Company, should be required, as a receipt of taxpayers' money, to adopt that definition?
I guess, yes, would be my short answer. I think that the IHRA definition is one that is decided by the community and is democratically decided both by, obviously, the student movement, UJS, but also in wider circles of the community. And I believe in autonomy and I believe in democracy. And so the two together would say, yes, I do think that universities should be adopting that definition. I think that the role of that lobbying should and can come from the students and work from student unions to pressure their universities, because they're the ones with the power to do so. And UJS would fully always support and give the backing and release guidance in how to do that for student unions, both Jewish and non-Jewish students within the student unions that wish to do that, and they should, and we should be encouraging people to do that, definitely, especially as, for me, it's policy of NUS. HEFCE, the Higher Education Funding Council for England, sorry it's a bit long, but they have just released funding, and that is for universities to bid into this pot where they can bid in to do work around kind of hate crime, and within that can be anti-Semitism. So I've been helping some chief executives of student unions around the country to help bid into that pot, specifically with work to do with anti-Semitism on campus, because universities do recognise that it is an issue on their campus. They also recognise that it's not just an issue isolated, so when students do experience this, it has kind of a domino effect on all their services. So mental health services, for example, of students that might be targeted, it might affect their grades, they might not feel comfortable to go onto campus, and it's much more of an effect rather than just a reputational issue for the university. And universities have a duty to call out what's happening, and I don't agree with universities at all that sweep under the carpet what's happening to potentially deter students. I think that's awful. But I believe that universities are actually heading in the right direction. And the support that I got from my university was second to none, actually. I met with the head of the support services of the entire university quite often, who frequently offered me, free university accommodation if I didn't feel safe at my house, which was fine. But and other things, and universities are taking on the responsibility. We're seeing more often than not. Whether it's as quickly as we'd like, probably not. But that is the role of NUS and students, I think, to really be at the forefront of that fight, and to make sure that the IHRA definition is enacted upon and is policy within universities and passed, and training. I think training is also really important.
To just add, but also to echo what Izzy said, yes, it'd be great if that were the case, but also if we look at the situation, the number of university campuses, you brought up the example of SOAS, but the number of university campuses that have adopted this definition, our government, for example, was the first globally, if I'm not mistaken, to adopt this definition. That's a real stride in the right direction. And so I think what this does is, should we ever be faced with similar levels of anti-Semitism again, which I hope is not the case, but should that be the case, universities and student unions, and also wider society, is a lot better equipped to deal with it. They have the policies in place, they have the awareness through the training that we have given and will continue to give, and we can ensure that the IRA definition is fully enacted, but also that just there's a general awareness of anti-Semitism within society, as we were talking about. And so I do strongly believe that despite this resistance, SOAS and the remaining universities that have not yet taken this upon themselves will follow suit. I'm confident of that.
I think SOAS is one of those interesting cases. You might be aware that our president, Jonathan Arkush, and our vice president, Marie van der Zyl, had a meeting with her alongside David Brown, chief executive of UJS, and I was also in the meeting. And so I was trying to set up the meeting, we were trying to sort out dates, and their diary secretary went really, really quiet. And so I was like chasing her up, and eventually she got back to me and she said, "I'm really sorry that I haven't got back to you yet, but our office has been occupied by students." So it just sums it up, really. The actual meeting itself was a really difficult meeting because we said to her, why don't you adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism? Not only has this been adopted by the government, it's been adopted by the Scottish government, and not only the Scottish government, it's been adopted by the Labour Party. So if you can't adopt a definition that's been adopted by the Labour Party, then we're in a really interesting situation. And I think in terms of when we talk about funding, this was covered in Joe Johnson's letter to all vice-chancellors. This is a point that he made. You know, you're in receipt of public funding. You have a duty to have balance on campus and a duty to your students, a duty of care. So we do have these problems with individual universities and individual vice-chancellors. I'd like to say we're making progress. I think on individual cases, yes, we are making progress, and this is thanks to the efforts that we've all been doing. But there are individual leaderships who struggle to get it. And you know, we're involved in continuing and robust discussions with those vice-chancellors, and hopefully we'll see some progress soon.
Another question?
Jane Myers. Out of interest, how many universities across the country are having Israel Apartheid Week? And my second question is, with all the good work that's happening at NUS and with all the joined-up activities happening with the Board of Deputies and the UJS, why is it not banned from the university campuses? I don't understand why it's being allowed to happen year after year and putting our Jewish students in a very uncomfortable and unsafe environment where they should be feeling safe on campus.
So thank you for the question. There's no doubt that Israel Apartheid Week is an incredibly uncomfortable experience for many students, Jewish students especially, and there's no doubt that off the back of this event, there have been anti-Semitic incidences. I personally experienced that when I was at Nottingham. Someone was accusing me, myself, of harming his family in East Jerusalem during the Gaza war. Like, I didn't really understand the geography myself. I would say, and also, I'm sorry, if you look at the momentum of Israel Apartheid Week, and I would be as bold as to say of the BDS movement in general in this country, it's on the way down. This year's, the Apartheid Week that's just gone was the smallest we've ever seen. Definitely during my 3 years of university, I'm assured it's been the case for a while. This is the smallest number of events. Universities, you saw it banned in several campuses. I personally don't believe that is the way forward. I think that when you are faced with these awful, difficult, and vile events such as Apartheid Week, rather than ban them and suggest that it's beyond the pale and that we won't engage in it, I would suggest that we show through other proactive work, actually, here's some nuance. Because most students, Apartheid Week, for example, if they put up a mock checkpoint or if they have a stall, the engagement is incredibly low. The checkpoint is an annoyance to students wanting to go into the library to study, for example. And yes, there is the welfare of Jewish students that is our foremost concern. But also, if you look at the engagement of wider students, it's minimal. And if you look at the engagement of alternatives such as our Bridges Not Boycotts campaign, it's incredibly high because we And Jewish students and JSOCs show that they have nuance on this, on the conflict, and that they can bring about change. So once you ban something, you say it shouldn't be here, that kind of invites the inquisitive mind. Why shouldn't it be here? You want to find out more about it, and I actually believe the engagement will be higher should you ban them. I think that it has been fizzling out, and it will fizzle out completely because of the incredible work that has been done and we will continue to do to that end.
I guess the Israel-Palestine debate on campus is a really important debate, but I emphasise the word debate. I think that I believe in the power of dialogue rather than boycotts, and I think that there is a strong opportunity on campuses, for there are students on all sides of the argument that feel very passionately about it, and then there's a wide proportion of students that haven't the foggiest about what's happening in the region. But I think that it's a real opportunity to have the debate, and I think that tactics like Israel Apartheid Week don't allow the debate, and that's where it's failing. I think the debate needs to happen, and I think that through the work of UJS and what Josh was saying, that they do some really great work within the debate. I think that, so within NUS, you mentioned NUS, bit of historical background. 2 years ago, the president last year, when she was Black Students Officer, called the organisation institutionally racist, and from that claim there was a big institutional racism review which went on for 2 years. We made sure that Jewish students were being heard within that review, and from that review, a few weeks ago was launched, it's public if you want to check it out online, a plan called the Race Equity Plan, so how to deal with should probably have said, the finding of the review said that the institution wasn't institutionally racist, but had some serious failings when it came to black staff, officers, volunteers, and the same with Jewish and Muslim counterparts. And from that, they produced this race equity plan. And within the plan, it's amazing to see, and I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it. There's a whole section on tackling anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And within that, it has the importance of creating spaces for healthy, safe, welcoming dialogue, and it is a really big step in the right direction. And I wouldn't mind sitting here criticising NUS's work in the past, but the work that it's planning to do in this plan is really refreshing for the student movement. It recognises that there is so much nuance in the debate, and the language is so important. And so NUS is committed over the next 5 years. It's not a short term. Can't put a plaster on this wound, you know. It's a long term, over 5-year process of finding out how to conduct safe, welcoming debate on this issue. And NUS is committed to do that, and within understanding the importance of language as well. So NUS recognises it's an issue, recognises that it can lead and has lead and may in the future lead to anti-Semitic incidents and incidents of hate crime on all sides of the debate, but it is committed to tackling this, and it has recognised it, and hopefully the positive work moving forward will allow safer debate.
I mean, just very quickly on Israeli Apartheid Week, I mean, I actually don't think it requires much to talk about, because as Josh said, every year we get calls about it, and people are really worried about it, and over the last 2 years, the number of calls we get has declined, because it's a bit of a damp squib these days. I mean, no one really actually gets involved in it that much. And I think also many vice-chancellors are aware now that it shouldn't be front and centre of their campus, and it's normally only a handful of activists who are involved in the first place, and so often they move it to a smaller location or something that's less visible. But obviously we are wise to it, and we know that it happens. So one thing that UJS and the Board of Deputies has done is something called the Bridges Not Boycotts campaign, and so one thing that we've done is we have sent these campaign resources out to all universities, sent them out to students, and also promoted them online. And it's basically saying that rather than boycott things, let's talk about how we can get to peace. Let's talk about how we can invest in the future. Let's have a positive conversation. Let's not shut down debate. Let's not use stupid terms like apartheid. And so this has been a really, really successful campaign. And it's taken the fight to those activists. It's saying, we're on the front foot, we know what we're talking about, and we are going to produce a positive and dynamic conversation and really empower our Jewish students on campus to talk about peace and not talk about division.
We're going to have to draw to a close. I think what has come out from our three very fine speakers, future leaders of the Jewish community, is that they are engaging in dialogue. They're not too upset. They think things are improving. I'm perhaps a bit more old-fashioned. I'm not so optimistic. And I would, as a lawyer, attempt to use more of the tools in the equality tool bag against this. I have no doubt that legally the Israel Apartheid Week, especially if it involves any action or expenditure, is contrary to charity law, and it's not something that student unions should be engaging in. I revert to my earlier point. Can you imagine a campus tolerating, let's say, African Corruption Week? They certainly wouldn't. And I don't see why we should tolerate that either. So my view, which is probably a minority, is that we should be more aggressive about this. There's nothing to be lost, I think, in the modern day by aggression. But anyway, we will see which tactic moves us forward. And in the meantime, I take great heart, as I'm sure you all do, from the very fine Jewish students that we have on campus up and down the country, that we value enormously. And they know, all of them, and I hope you three will take the message back, that this community, in fact, every adult community in the country, values you, supports you. You're our children and our grandchildren, you're our future leaders, and we think you are brave and intelligent and outgoing, and we wish you every success, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Just before you go, Edgware United never lets people go away empty-handed. So, may I give a bottle of wine to each of
Oh, I think it's coming round. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Spencer.
I don't know which is
and to Baroness Deech.
I don't get no. I don't want to wine.
We can share it.
No.
This is to record that Edgware United Synagogue has made a generous donation in support of our work in the field of infertility in the name of Baroness Ruth Deech, DBE, in appreciation of her chairing the panel debate on anti-Semitism on campus. I'd like to thank all our panelists and Baroness Deech for coming here today. I think we've had a most educative evening, and I hope that you will now realise the problems that students have at British universities. Thank you for coming.